Okay, in the last video we were talking about how we actually store these simple sugars as longer chains or branches in living things. And so these are kind of the sugar storage for plants, energy storage being for the starch, and cellulose making up the cell walls. Glycogen is how animals store carbohydrates. And so they're going to store them in the liver as well as in the muscles, okay? All right, so we take those sugars in our food and we put them together in a specific shape. And that molecule is then called glycogen, and we leave it in our liver and muscles. Now, there's only a certain amount of room, so you can think of liver and muscles kind of like suitcases. They fill up with glycogen, and when the suitcase is full, that's it. So what we do is basically turn all of these carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens into fat. And fat will get stored in their own particular cells. So your fat cells will store those, and it's a little bit more efficient way of storing all those molecules, okay? So that's that. So what you see here, these are just simple sugars, and remember they connect together kind of like this to make those longer chains there. All right, and so let's move on to the second type of macromolecule. This is proteins. Okay, and so proteins are made of smaller molecules called amino acids. So for proteins, a protein is a really big molecule. It's a really big long chain, and you can think of it as kind of like a big necklace. All right, so the carbohydrates kind of work the same way. It looked kind of like this with those rings of sugars. Proteins are the same way, except it's not sugars this time. It's this molecule right here. This is an amino acid. Okay, so let's see. Right here, that's an amino group. Okay, you might remember that from our notes. And so you see that's bonded to a central carbon atom. And this part right here, this is a functional group. This right here is called the carboxyl group. All right, now this right here, there's 20 different types of amino acids that we find in living things. So 20 different amino acids. Okay, so basically what's going to happen, and I'll show you all 20 of them, okay? So you can see here, there's a carboxyl group, there's an amino group, central carbon, and you see that each of these groups are slightly different, okay? But they all share this general structure here. And the way they form this long macromolecule polymer is that they'll basically covalently bond together like this, okay? And so they'll form this big long chain. So a protein is just a big chain of all these different amino acids. And depending on what order they're in, it's going to create a different type of protein. And we'll practice more of that later. Okay, and so let's talk about what proteins actually do and where we find them. So proteins, they're found in muscles. Okay, so you know if you want to get high protein in your diet, you would eat a lot of meat. Legumes, these are beans, eggs, the egg white in particular, nuts, okay, which many nuts are actually legumes anyways, so it's like the seed portion of the plant, and that's going to provide a lot of protein for the growing plant. So if we want to eat protein, we would eat those parts of the plant. Now, so in human beings, we're going to eat protein, and that's going to be used to build muscles, but other structures include hair, nails are made out of protein. More importantly, though, in the cell, there are proteins that hold your cells together. So it's kind of like a scaffolding for your cells. Okay, so if this is a single cell, you'll find a whole network of proteins inside as well as outside the cell. And so they're going to kind of connect adjoining cells together. Okay, so it provides structure to cells and to joining cells there. So those are all protein strands here. Another reason we use proteins is because each of our cells has a unique marker on its surface. Okay, so protein markers on the surface of the cell can sense its environment. So a lot of times things that need to come into the cells are ID'd by these proteins. And each of you have a specific protein marker. So if you get a bacteria in your blood, then you know that that bacteria is foreign because it's not going to have the same marking on it. All right, so these are called marker proteins, marker and receptor proteins. Another big reason we need proteins in our diet, actually the biggest reason, is because they are enzymes, okay? So enzymes are these molecules that control chemical reactions. And we're going to learn more about those later in the class. Okay, so enzymes are catalysts. They control and make sure all the chemical reactions happen in your body. This is the number one thing that our proteins go towards, okay? Now, at the end of the day, if we have all the muscles and enzymes and markers, everything that we need, we could actually basically rip off this nitrogen piece, turn this into a carbohydrate, and basically use that as energy. So energy is kind of like the last source, the last function of proteins, okay? All right, and so the next video is going to cover lipids and nucleic acids.